Total War Warhammer 2 is a game about a planet-wide race war. This game is the second installment in the Total War franchise, following the major disappointment that was Total War Rome 2. There are over 5 factions to choose in this game, and only 3 of them are good. I'm gonna rate them backwards, because I'm just that fucking twisted of a guy, you know? The Vampire Coast is a faction all about vampires in the coast. They're a ripoff of that one guy from Pirates of the Caribbean. One of their units is stolen from the Lego movie as well, but this makes sense, because pirates are all about stealing stuff. Their playable lords have the gimmick of all having different mental disorders. For example, Loser Harkon has multiple personality disorder, Silostra Direfin has schizophrenia, Aradessa Saltspite is a woman, and Count Noctilus violated me at my 7th birthday party. This faction is extremely fun to watch, has a charismatic roster of units, and is overall just really cool. Unfortunately they are DLC, and I don't own any of the DLC, so this faction is a 0 out of 10. The Tomb Kings are this game's version of African people. Just like in real life, everybody in Fantasy Africa is starving. They are also all very poor. But instead of dying after they starve, these guys have the special ability to continue living even when all their flesh disappeared. This is kind of ironic because their king sounds like a brand of canned good. In the campaign mode, they have to deal with French colonizers and also giant pterodactyls. This makes them a bit like Australia as well. They use a mix of starving African children and funny magical statues to crush people. I love the look and feel of these guys, but unfortunately they are also DLC, so they get a thumbs down. The Lizardmen are the first good faction I've talked about so far. They are based in Fantasy South America, but there's also some dipshit in Fantasy Scandinavia who immediately dies because he's cold-blooded. Lizardmen society is divided into 3 racial castes: the Slan, the Saurus, and the Skink. The Slan are obese boomers on mobility scooters who do magic tricks. It's not hard to see why the rest of the Lizardmen bow to them. The Saurus are stupid, dumb, big old walking crocodiles who smack around inferior races of their big lizard strength. The Kroxigor also fit in the same social caste as the Saurus, as in, they're slaves. The backstory behind these guys is that some asshole at Games Workshop made a model of Saurus a few inches too big, so they said fuck it and turned it into a new unit type. The Skinks are cute little salamander buddies. They're a bit smarter than the Saurus and they work as altar boys for the Slan. I'm going to give this faction an 8 out of 10. I'm going to dock 2 points because the Lords Pinky and the Brain are locked behind the DLC paywall. The High Elves are if British people were more insufferable. You had 2 options for your campaign if you want to play as the High Elves. Either you pick Tyrion the Simp King and circle jerk on a floating donut for 60 turns until you made best friends of everybody. But the name of the game isn't fucking Total Peace Hammer 2, is it? No, so you're gonna pick one of the base lords and go colonizer mode, fulfilling the dream of slaughtering Aztecs and winning the Revolutionary War. Your unit roster consists of a bunch of posh assholes and the dragons they paid for with Daddy's credit card. Their selection is very balanced, which makes them very boring. Overall, the faction is a snooze fest out of 10. The Dark Elves are if American people were more based. Their leaders are the tag team duo of Mommy and Issues. Anakin Skywalker turned to the dark side because of issues concerning his mother, his girlfriend, and his mentor. Malekith had these same issues, but his mother, girlfriend, and mentor were the same person. Their High Elf cousins over in the Donut make fun of them on Twitter, bragging about their free health care and a lack of mass killings every 2 hours. But what the High Elves don't have is blood sacrifices. Speaking of blood sacrifices, there are a lot of major American values that the Druchii encompass. What the Druchii don't have over their real-life American counterparts is access to guns. Tragic. I give the Dark Elves a 7 out of 10. I'm docking 3 points because one of their lords is named Malice Darkblade. Every 6 years, under the light of the full moon, the Ratman cometh. The gathering of rodents of all shapes and unusual sizes. Small rat, big rat, gun rat, fun rat, stinky rat, sneaky rat, and even abomination. These rats all emerge from their hiding holes and lay waste upon the civilized world. Such is the rat way. I would have called their leaders Pinky and the Brain, but I already wasted that joke in the Lizardmen. I'm gonna give this faction a 9 out of 10, with 1 point docked, because the icon for their food resource isn't cheese. The Norsemen are fantasy Vikings who worship the gods of chaos and eat human flesh for fun. Their faction is really boring because their unit roster consists solely of white men of axes. They also use warhounds. This makes them very good friends with the Skaven because dogs are the most rat-like animal. I would pass this faction off as boring, but they put my boy Throg Wintertooth, King of the Trolls in, so it's all good. Still though, they are DLC, so 0 out of 10. The Warriors of Chaos are fantasy Vikings who worship the gods of chaos and eat human flesh for fun. Their faction is really boring because their unit roster consists solely of armored men with swords. They also use chaotic abominations. This makes them very good friends with the Skaven because the Skaven love abominable affronts to nature. I would pass this faction off as boring, but they put my boy Kolek Suneater Herald of the Tempest in, so it's all good. Still though, they are DLC, so 0 out of 10. The Beastmen may be the most irrelevant faction in all of Total War history. Nobody likes them, nobody talks about them, nobody even sees them in the campaign because they die within 5 turns of spawning. Their gimmick is that they can't build cities. Yeah, nice job removing half of the game and calling it a new faction, dipshits. And their DLC. Steam analytics say that 3 people in total bought this faction, and 2 of them requested a refund. -2 out of 10. The Bretonnians are a fantasy version of France. Okay, so the next 2 factions are just like directly ripped off from Lord of the Rings. These guys, you know, they're just elves, they're best friends with trees. I mean, they're also a DLC faction, so they're 0 out of 10. These ones are orcs.
I am the Uruk Bard. A worthy foe is hard.
They're big and mean and shit. I mean, you know, you know what a goblin is. 3 out of 10.
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with an elf.
What about side by side with a friend?
You smell like you farted. Farted. 8 feet on the road, she was talking.
The Vampire Counts are the world's greatest collection of Dracula roleplayers the world has ever seen. Your legendary lord choices are Von Karstein, or Von Karstein. Also, there's their uncle who's never invited to family gatherings. We don't really talk about him. Anyways, they do like standard vampire shit. They summon zombies and bats and plot destruction of humanity and all that. They get a pass, I guess. 5 out of 10. And the Empire is just fucking boring. I mean, they're literally just guys. I mean, I guess they have guns and mortars and shit, but whatever. With all these cool fantasy races in the game, you'd have to be a real shitbag to play as real-life Germany instead.